Okay, one more thing that we need to go over is the Phillips curve. And we know the Phillips curve takes into account what two ideas?
Inflation and unemployment.
That's very good. We have our obvious inflation and unemployment. The idea was that if I go ahead and draw a Phillips curve, which should look what? Downward sloping. Straight line or curved line? It doesn't matter. It can be curved, just so make sure you bend it in. So we have inflation and unemployment. The idea was that if a government wanted to reduce unemployment, they could do that by just adding some inflation. So if we are right here to this rate of unemployment, we could reduce it by ramping up our inflation. Let's say we peg it to here and we'd have less unemployment. And it kind of works. Or if we wanted less inflation, we'd have to sacrifice having more unemployment, which is a pretty simple concept. Except what kind of Phillips curve did I just draw right here? Notice I didn't label. Short run. So this is your short run Phillips curve. Now, as I go ahead and here, let me redraw this because I'm not finished drawing this. What else could go on this graph? All right, we might have our short run Phillips curve, but we also want to consider that we have a long run Phillips curve. So that means, what would this be right here at this rate of inflation? This would be the natural rate. Natural rate of unemployment. Okay? That's what would go right here. The natural rate of unemployment. Which, is that good or bad? Good. That's the right number of people with what types of unemployment? Frictional and structural. So people are looking for jobs. People are seeing that they need training. But it's enough that if I'm a business trying to hire, I can find some people to hire. And we say natural rate is pretty good. So we have our long run Phillips curve and our short run Phillips curve. Now, does that mean this is the end of everything? No, we also know that if we look at our original graphs, it's going to take a while to get to, but if we look here, how does this affect the Phillips curve? Well, the Phillips curve, does it shift aggregate demand? No, but a shift in aggregate demand will cause what to happen? Well, remember, let's look at what happens. What happens to the price level? It increases, and what's going to happen to the unemployment rate? So a shift in aggregate demand causes inflation, and what would happen to unemployment here? Less unemployment, which means if we go back to our Phillips curve, it would move where? Okay, that would move up the curve because we said we had inflation, but we had bigger GDP, which means less unemployment. Now, if aggregate demand, there's a negative demand shock, how would this affect the Phillips curve? It would move down the Phillips curve, and we'd come down here, and we'd have higher unemployment because a negative demand shock causes less GDP, higher unemployment, but you'd have disinflation. So it would increase unemployment. So really quickly, a demand shock moves what in relation to the demand curve? It moves you up and down. So the key there is demand shock. So a change in demand, you're going to go up and down the Phillips curve. So we stay on the line. And that's maybe that little note you want to put there. However, if I go ahead and undo this, and there we go, and I go back to our short run aggregate supply here, and let's go ahead and undo these. Oh, there we go. Okay. If I go ahead and have a shift in supply, what kind of supply shock do you guys want? All right, let's do a positive supply shock. Now, if we look right here, we know that we're increasing GDP, which would do what to the unemployment rate? So we call unemployment to go down. while it would do what to the price level? So, lower inflation and lower unemployment. But now let's go ahead and skip back to our Phillips curve, as I greatly realize I should probably put these closer together in the future. Whoops. Okay. If I go ahead and look at my Phillips curve here, we said that what did unemployment do with our supply shock? So our change in supply, we said it's a positive supply shock. So it causes unemployment to do what? Unemployment would decrease, whereas what would happen to inflation? Inflation would decrease. Well, wait a minute. Inflation wants to increase over here if unemployment is going to decrease, which means what do we have to do? Okay, so we need to draw a new line. So we can go ahead and say, all right, now at this rate of inflation, we're going to have less unemployment. Or even at a lower rate, we would have less unemployment, and we would also could have a lower price level. So changes in supply do what to the Phillips curve? Okay, so supply shocks change the whole, and I'm going to put short run Phillips curve. By the way, the change is what? If it's a positive supply shock, it'll move the Phillips curve in what way? It'll move it to the left, so it would kind of decrease it. Or a positive supply shock causes the opposite change on the Phillips curve. Does that make sense? A negative demand shock would cause, a negative supply shock would cause what to happen? The Phillips curve to shift to the right, and so we'd end up with our short run Phillips curve, and I'll put 2, and you can call this short run Phillips curve 1. And now we know that we'll have inflation, and we can keep the same unemployment rate, or even having higher inflation and more unemployment. Okay, so do you guys understand your Phillips curves? Yes?
Positive demand shock moves to the left. Or moves that point up the curve.
Yes, and remember, if you draw it out, and we go back to our original curve, by simply drawing it out, you should be able to realize that, a lot of scribbling. And here, I'll undo this really. What? No. Okay. I don't know why that just happened. But if you go ahead back to here, you would see that, let's go back to equilibrium. A positive demand shock causes what to happen to the price level? It moves the price level up. And what does it do to unemployment? Well, if GDP has increased, we know that unemployment would decrease, right? So, higher prices, higher inflation, here, lower unemployment, higher prices. So, we flip back to our Phillips curve, and we see that if we go back to our original here, higher prices, let's say this is our equilibrium, higher prices, but what happens to unemployment? We said it was going to be lower, so we'd move from here to here. Lower unemployment, higher prices. So if you just go, wait, what's happening? Draw your Phillips curve and connect the dots. Even if you don't remember these kinds of formulas I'm giving you here, you should be able to figure it out so long as you go, hey, I'm dealing with unemployment. I'm dealing with inflation. I know how that relates to my GDP and my price levels. So if you can connect those two, this speaks for itself.
So is long run Phillips curve shift?
The long run Phillips curve should only shift, because we're at the natural rate of unemployment, is if something happens in the economy to change that number. So it could be something like no structural unemployment or no frictional. But the question would have to do what if we're going to move long run Phillips curve? It would have to address a change in what? The natural rate of unemployment. Okay? Any more questions? All right. I hope you guys understood your Phillips curve, and you'll see a few questions on it when we get to the exam. Oh no.